Hello everyone, this is Putnam County historian Larry Tippin. We've been doing a series on what we call the tiny towns and vanished villages of Putnam County. And today I'd like to talk about Cloverdale. Now I'm going to show you various slides, newspaper articles and so forth. And if I advance a slide before you're done reading, you can always pause or grab a little button on the bottom of your screen and go back. So most townships include entire surveyed legal township. For instance, Greencastle Township consists entirely of Township 14 North, Range 4 West. Cloverdale Township, however, includes parts of Township 12 North, Range 3 West, 12 North, Range 4 West, 13 North, Range 3 West, and 12 North, or 13 North, Range 4 West. I will show that on a map here in just a little bit. This is the 1879 Atlas of Putnam County. Can't really see any detail. We're going to look closer later, but you can see basically that Cloverdale is much wider than it is north and south. 1879 Atlas, Putnam County, more detail. You see Cloverdale, northern part, north central Cloverdale Township. You also see Westland, Jenkinsville, Hamrick Station, Pleasant Garden, and a few other communities. The area of what is now Cloverdale was settled first by William Hamilton and James Robinson, who built cabins after arriving together from Kentucky in the spring of 1823, we believe, according to the newspaper articles. The first murder in the county, followed immediately by the first suicide, happened in Cloverdale. Other early settlers of the Cloverdale area were Thomas James, Ambrose Bandy, John Macy, and Andrew Kilgore. This group of men, along with pioneer James Robinson, involved in the first murder, followed immediately by the first suicide, over a quantity of flax. It appears that Robinson's wife had employed Mrs. Eunice Bandy, wife of Ambrose Bandy, to spin some flax. Mrs. Bandy returned the spun flax. Mrs. Robinson waited and thought the quantity was returned a short 1 dozen. Newspaper articles didn't say 1 dozen what. So usually when somebody employed another person, there's no money changed hands. In this case, the weaver would retain a quantity of the flax in exchange for services provided. She shared this information with neighbor women, gossiped about it until it was heard of by the Bandys. Ambrose Bandy became particularly enraged and threatened to sue Robinson and his wife for slander. This in turn enraged Robinson, described as a moral, sulky, and quick-tempered individual. Robinson became unfriendly with his neighbors, but talked about the flax, especially angered at Bandy, James, Macy, and Kilgore. One day in April of 1824, Bandys visited the James, staying overnight. This particularly upset Robinson. Thomas James was living with his wife and 3 small children near what was known as Granny Nelson's Spring on the north side of Cloverdale. A few days later, Robinson arose and informed his family that they would thereafter have to take care of themselves. He left his cabin, gun in hand, intent on settling the score on the matter of the flax. Robinson went first to the Bandys, apparently intent on making Ambrose Bandy his first victim. Bandy was able to observe Robinson approaching and hid behind a tree. So Robinson passed by. Robinson then went to Macy's. As Robinson approached, he saw Macy with his son James clearing the area around their cabin. and he could not bring himself to harm Macy. The presence of his young son moved on by. He next went to where Thomas James was constructing a new cabin, which is on land now occupied by the Cloverdale Cemetery. Robinson observed James was alone in the forest, making flooring for the cabin about 200 yards from his temporary dwelling that he had. It was when Thomas James was hunched over his work that Robinson snuck from tree to tree in order to come closer without being observed. Robinson, there was a distance of about 50 yards, fired at James. Ball entered James' left arm, passed through his torso from side to side, lodging in his skin. Looking toward the direction of the gunfire, the sound of gunfire, James observed Robinson in the act of lowering his gun. James at first was not mortally wounded, was able to run the 200 yards to his temporary dwelling. The nearest doctor was a Dr. Lowe at Greencastle. He was sent for, and after examining James, removed the ball and made an effort to heal the external wounds. Because back then, of course, they don't know about germ warfare and sanitation that we do now. Often did this with bare hands and so forth. So James lingered 28 days and died of blood poisoning, which many felt could have been avoided by a more experienced physician than the young Dr. Lowe. But Robinson would know none of this. After finding what became the fatal shot, he returned to his home, which was about a half mile south of where he sought James. His oldest child, a daughter, was caring for the family's baby, while wife and the other children were working in a clearing near the cabin. Robinson reloaded his rifle, attached one end of a string to the trigger and the other to a peg sticking in the wall outside the cabin, placed the muzzle of the gun against his left breast, and in drawing it toward him, discharged it. Passed through his heart, killing him instantly. He was buried on his own land, which was in Section 6, Township 12 North, 3 West, which is south of Cloverdale Cemetery. No current records of James Robinson's gravesite exist, nor the gravesite of Thomas James. Some of the newspaper articles we'll like to see. Here's one, 1867. It talks about the first door, which was kept by a man named Fuller, followed by Harrison and Richard Grooms, John William Sandy. There were at one time 3 dry goods stores, 1 hardware store, furniture store, and so forth and so on. You can go to the Hoosier State Chronicles online and then look this article up if you'd like to read the rest of it. Then April 15th, 1967. Then this is from the 1879 Atlas of Putnam County. Not always accurate, but I'm going to give you the information it's got. They're talking about Cloverdale here, the township. It says in 1831, the first sawmill was built on Doe Creek in what's now south end of Cloverdale. There was no flour or grist mill in the township until the steam grist mill, flour mill, was erected by Joseph Piercy and West Woodville, year 1863. Moses Nelson kept the first tavern, the township, in basically what's now the town of Cloverdale, 1836. And the same year, his son, Thomas Nelson, put up the first door. Now, we'll talk more about those 2 gentlemen here in just a few minutes. And then it goes on about the first schools, the first teachers, and so forth and so on. If you don't have a copy of the 1879 Atlas, we have some wonderful reproduction. They're available for sale at the Putnam County Museum. Then an article in 1879 about the town of Cloverdale itself. Said the first store was kept by a man named Fuller in Nelson's old building, followed by Harrison and Richard Grooms, John and William Sandy. Then it goes on to say a number of dry goods stores and livery stables and 2 hotels and then the stone quarry, which is an important part of rural industry of Cloverdale. And then also lists some of the merchants in 1879 and the prominent business people. You see names that should be familiar to you: Stockwell, Vestall, Pritchard, Bandy, Dennington, Siegel, may or may not be pronouncing that right, Lewis, Crowell, Dyer, and so forth, so on. And then one of them is Delana Eccles, who is becoming a prominent attorney in the Cloverdale area. And you could read more of that if you want to get the 1879 atlas. This is 1864 map of Putnam County, available online, courtesy of the Library of Congress. And I've zoomed in, and you can see Cloverdale, and you can also see the dashed line going north from Cloverdale, which separates the range 3 and range 4, and also going west out of town, just north of Cloverdale, that separates Township 12 North and 13 North. And you see that this dashed line dividing between ranges goes right through the middle of Cloverdale. The section of Cloverdale Township now known as West Cloverdale was entered by William Hamilton in 1823, and then the part known as East Cloverdale by John Macy, October 1st, 1823. Cloverdale acquired a post office on February 11th, 1836, with the appointment of William S. Hart as postmaster. The post office was named as Cloverdale, 2 words, in the early postal records, began to be referred to as Cloverdale, 1 word, with the appointment of Solomon Acres in 1855. We can see that this is actual records from the Postal Service. You show Cloverdale, 2 words, William Hart, February of 1836, and then Solomon Acres. Now Cloverdale is 1 word, which is as it continues from that time forward in 1855. By 1839, Moses Nelson, who lived from 1783 to 1849, and his son Thomas, who lived from 1811 to 1852, had acquired sections of these parcels in East Cloverdale and West Cloverdale, respectively. And then they plotted out Cloverdale, but they didn't plot out Cloverdale as Cloverdale. They plotted it out as East Cloverdale and West Cloverdale. And we believe in 1839, they began selling lots in 1843, and both father and son, Moses Thomas Nelson, buried in Cloverdale Cemetery. So when they first recorded the deed, they didn't put it in the deed books, or in the plat books, excuse me, where the other plots are. They put it in deed book G, page 132, and we'll look at that. And it's very hard to read. You can see division line right down the middle, which is the range 3 or range 4 line. You see East Cloverdale and West Cloverdale. And then a little bit here, barely read, talks about Thomas Nelson, and then his father, Moses Nelson, platting West Cloverdale and East Cloverdale. And again, it's not dated. We believe it's about 1839. By 1849, the General Assembly of the state of Indiana passed legislation to incorporate the town of Cloverdale. And this is a close-up map from the 1864 map of Putnam County, town of Cloverdale. You see the north half of the town, including the Academy lot, very large lot, and then the south half of the town, which is much more populated. And then the business directory in 1864, a lot of the same people you saw in 1879, but a few that are different. You see Piercy, Smith, Foster Brothers, and so forth, so on. Dr. Dyer again, Dr. Wise, some others. And you can pause it and read it if you'd like. So Cloverdale Seminary, let's talk about that. We saw it on the map in 1864. The first physician in Cloverdale was Hiram Dyer, native of Virginia. Dr. Dyer married Rhoda McGinnis of Owen County in 1845, then began practicing medicine in Cloverdale. Dr. Dyer was instrumental in establishing the Cloverdale Seminary, created to train teachers, which was incorporated and approved by the Indiana General Assembly in 1850. Now, a seminary at the time, we're not talking a religious seminary. It's more like an academy or seminary of learning. So it's a school, basically, but kind of a private school, not one of the one-room public schools. Usually give a little bit more advanced education than you can get from the one-room schoolhouse. So the school is located west of Columbia Street, Main Street. Dyer, Andrew McCoy, and Sandy were the largest stockholders, and Professor William Bray, was the school instructor, basically. Wonderful article the Greencastle Democrat published November 19th, 1892. Again, it's available online, Hoosier Straight Chronicles, so you can get it and read the whole article if you want. I'm going to summarize part of it. And then it goes on to say it had a copy of the Putnam County Sentinel dated May 22nd, 1851. I never could find a copy of that actual newspaper, so quoting it from the 1892 article. Preserved by Jerome Allen, contains a report by Dr. McGinnis of the first commencement exercises of the seminary in 1851. So apparently the 11 students that are graduating each gave a talk of some sort. You can see that Mary Hart wrote a poem and recited the beauties of spring. A dialogue of flowers by Virginia McDowell, Sarah Hughes. Liberty by Melissa Draper. Female Rights by Margaret Burroughs. Beauties of Nature by Mary A.C. Martin. True Greatness by Joseph McGinnis. Female Education, Jane Stockman. Benefits of Industry by Margaretta McCoy. Slavery by H.B. Martin. Greatness of Our Country, J.H. Martin. I mean, that's 1851. So those are important topics of the time. And that newspaper article goes on to say the speeches delivered were original and of the highest order. It did great honor to the speakers and instructors. Professor W.C. Bray, of those who stood upon the platform that afternoon, animated, bright futures, and full of aspiration, but few remained in 1892. The 1892 article also named each of these persons and what had happened to them in the meantime. Some were deceased, some still living nearby. Very wonderful article. The school was discontinued in 1853. It only lasted a couple of years because the majority of the stockholders refused to be taxed for its support. In February of 1877, a W.B. Harris established what we believe is the first newspaper in Cloverdale, called The Bee, which folded after just 1 year. And then 1878, Lyman Nagel, if I'm pronouncing it right, began publishing the local item, which survived for several years. The Cloverdale Graphic was also first printed in 1878. In May of 1939, it was renamed the Putnam County Daily Graphic and moved to Greencastle. In 1950, the Putnam County Graphic merged with the Rochelle publication, the Putnam Times News, becoming the Daily Graphic. After a fire destroyed the graphic building, the newspaper merged with Putnam County Banner to form the Banner Graphic. Other newspapers published in Cloverdale in the 19th century include the Cloverdale Gazette, Cloverdale Courier, Cloverdale Herald, and others. In 1976, a free weekly newspaper called the Hoosier Topics, serving Putnam County and parts of neighboring counties, began publication in Cloverdale. Let's talk about the railroad that we refer to as the Monon. It runs north and south through the county and through the whole state. Began in southern Indiana in 1847 as the New Albany and Salem Railroad Company with James Brooks as president. Salem industrialist from Salem, Indiana, Washington C.D. Paw, was another founder. And if that name sounds familiar, it should. The New Albany and Southern Railroad acquired existing northern Indiana rail lines in the early 1850s with the intent of connecting New Albany to Michigan City. The northern section was completed from Michigan City south of Baton Rouge by the end of 1853, then to Greencastle by March 17th of 1854. The southern extension was extended north from Salem through Bloomington and Gosport. The last 10 miles of track were completed in southern Putnam County soon after. The last spike connecting the north and south lines driven at 4 p.m. June 24th, 1854, at Connection Bridge, which is a small structure spanning Limestone Creek, about a mile southeast of Putnamville and a few miles northwest of Cloverdale. So that information is so precise, but as a Putnamville resident who was writing some of her reminiscences and so forth, noted the exact date and time. But there was no ceremony, probably late in the day. They did the connection and moved on. You can see where Connection Bridge is located on Limestone Creek, a little bit southwest of Putnamville. The entire length of the line from New Albany to Michigan City was formally dedicated with a grand ceremony in New Albany on July 4th, 1854, officially linking the Great Lakes to the Ohio River. And there's a wonderful state historical marker in New Albany. On the left, a little bit about the railroads, some of the things we've already discussed. And on the right, on the backside, interesting, it said fugitive slaves' use of the railroad in the 1850s caused great controversy. So you wouldn't think about that, but the fugitives seeking asylum to the north, it makes sense that they would follow a railroad because you've got an established path going north, probably traveled at night, and stayed at various safe homes, if you will, during the day. I thought that was kind of interesting. Some of the photos. Some of these are courtesy of the Putnam County Public Library, some from the archives of Putnam County Museum. This is Cloverdale Main Street, a postcard, 1908. Another postcard, circa about 1910, Main Street looking south, Cloverdale. Another photo of Main Street, we believe 1910. We can't tell which direction it's going, north or south. And then here's another South Main Street, not dated, probably about 1910 area. I don't know, maybe 1920. And then here's another postcard, Cloverdale. And then a photo of the depot. That's very interesting. We have a commencement program on the archives at Putnam County Museum. It says the 1900 commencements, Cloverdale and the Township Schools at City Hall on June 30th, 1900, list the 4 graduates of the high school, then the grammar department, probably the equivalent of middle school or something like that, And then the graduates from the township schools are also recognized at the same time. I'm going to end with this. This is a photo, Putnam County Public Library. It's online in their archives. You can view it. It's the Eccles Bridge, which is southeast of Cloverdale over Mill Creek. So I hope you've enjoyed a little bit about the early history of the town of Cloverdale. You can come back or you can view other videos by going to YouTube and just type in Putnam County Museum and then the topic, Putnam County Museum, Cloverdale, Putnam County Museum, Roachdale, or if you want to read about the First County Hospital, Putnam County Museum, County Hospital. And again, this is Larry Tippin, County Historian. I hope you'd enjoyed our session today. Thank you.